Happy Thursday, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to bring this closer for our question for today because it's got lots of words. And it is Think About It Thursday. So I gave you a word and it is upstander. And I gave you the part of speech, so it's a noun and the definition. And it's a person who acts to make a positive change. Sorry, I'm trying to read backwards by looking at my screen. A little hard. Okay, so it's a person who acts to make a positive change. So my question for you today is, what can you do to be an upstander? So what can you do to make a positive change in your life or in somebody else's life or in the world? What can you do? So how can you be an upstander? Okay, so you can email your answers to me or send them on Dojo or find me on Facebook and DM me there. Okay, we are going to finish the Tale of Despereaux today. It got really, really good yesterday, and Despereaux finally made it to the dungeon. But on the way down, he was rolling that spool of red thread, and it rolled down the stairs. And he came face to face with a rat, and specifically Botticelli. And Botticelli is the one who taught Riscuro that the rat's purpose in life is to make somebody suffer. It is to make others suffer. And Botticelli has now told Despereaux, I know where your princess is. I can take you to her. And he's trying to trick him by telling him, I'm going to help you because I need to change the way people think about rats. We need to improve our reputation with the world. We need to, everybody thinks rats are just these horrible, horrible things, and we need to try to fix that. So I'm going to help you by saving the princess. Is he telling the truth? Absolutely not. He is just trying to get Despereaux in front of the princess so that he can see the thing he loves and die in front of her. He has this awful, horrible plan to hurt Despereaux. Now, we don't know how Despereaux feels yet. We don't know if he knows that Botticelli is, tricking him. But Despereaux's a smart little cookie. And I bet Despereaux knows, or at least has a feeling that Botticelli is not telling him the truth. So we are going to start at chapter 48, and we are going to read all the way through the end. And then tomorrow we will have our Google Meets. So on Monday, we will start a new book. So on our Google Meets tomorrow, we will choose our new book. Okay, so chapter 48, On the Tail of a Rat. Remember, Despereaux is holding Botticelli's tail as they wander through the dungeon. Have you ever had hold of the tail of a rat? At best, it is an unpleasant sensation, scaly and cold, similar to holding on to a small, narrow snake. At worst, when you are dependent upon a rat for your survival, and when a part of you is certain that you are being led nowhere except to your death. It is a hideous sensation, indeed, to have nothing but a rat's tail to cling on to. Nonetheless, Despereaux held on to Botticelli Rimorso, and that rat led him deeper and deeper into the dungeon. Despereaux's eyes had, by this point, adjusted quite well to the darkness, though it would have been better if they had not, for the things he saw made him shiver and shake. What did he see? He saw the floor of the dungeon was littered with tufts of fur, knots of red thread, and the skeletons of mice. Everywhere there were tiny white bones glowing in the darkness, and he saw in the dungeon tunnels through which Botticelli led him, the bones of human beings too, grinning skulls and delicate finger bones rising up out of the darkness and pointing towards some truth best left unspoken. Despereaux closed his eyes, but it didn't help. He saw as if his eyes were still open, wide the bones, the tufts of hair, the knots of thread, the despair. Haha, exactly, Botticelli laughed as he negotiated the twists and turns. Oh yes, exactly. If what was in front of Despereaux was too horrible to contemplate, what followed behind him was perhaps even worse. Rats. A happy, hungry, vengeful parade of rats. Their noses up in the air, sniffing. Mouse, sang out one rat joyfully. Oh, yes, yes, a mouse, agreed another, but something else, too. Soup, called out another rat. Yes, soup, the others agreed. Blood, sang a rat. Blood, they all agreed together. And then they sang, here, mousey, 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 here, little mousey. Botticelli called out to the other rats. Mine, he said. This little treasure is all mine, gentlemen and ladies. Please, I beg you, do not infringe on my discovery. Mr. Remorso, said Despereaux, and he turned and looked behind him and saw the rats, their red eyes and their smiling mouths. He closed his eyes again. He kept them closed. Sorry, Jace is watching The Secret Life of Pets. He kept them closed. Mr. Remorso, he shouted. Yes, said Botticelli. Mr. Remorso, said Despereaux, and he was crying now and he couldn't help it. Please, the princess. Tears, shouted the rats. We smell tears, Mousy, we do. Please, shouted Despereaux. Oh, and here's a picture of Despereaux being led by Botticelli, and you can see in the shadow back here that the other rats are closing in. Little friend, said Botticelli, little Despereaux Tilling, I promised you, and I will keep that promise. The rat stopped. Look ahead you, he said. What do you see? Despereaux opened his eyes. Light, he said. Exactly, said Botticelli. Light. Chapter 49. What do you want, Megariso? Again, reader, we must go backward before we go forward. We must consider for a moment what had occurred with the rat and the serving girl and the princess down in the dungeon before Despereaux made his way to them. What happened was this. Riscuro led the Pea and Mig deep in the dungeon to a hidden chamber, and there he directed Mig to put the princess in chains. Gord, said Mig, she's gonna have a hard time learning her lessons if she's all chained up like. Do as I say, said Riscuro. Maybe, said Mig, before I lock her up, her and me could switch outfits, so we could start in already with her being me and me being a princess. Ah, yes, said Riscuro, certainly a wonderful idea. Miss Miggery, please take off your crown and give it to the serving girl. The Pea sighed and took off her crown and handed it to Mig, and Mig put it on and slid it immediately right down her small head, and it came to a rest quite painfully on her poor, abused ears. It's a biggish thing, she said, and painful like. Well, well, said Riscuro. How do I look? Mig asked, smiling at him. Ridiculous, he said. Laughable. Mig stood, blinking back tears. You mean I don't look like a princess? She said to the rat. I mean, said Riscuro, you will never look like a princess, no matter how big a crown you put on your tiny head. You look exactly like the fool you are and always will be. Now, make yourself useful and chain the princess up. Dress up time is over. Mig sniffed and wiped at her eyes and then bent to the pile of chains and locks on the floor. And now, princess, he said, I'm afraid that your truth has arrived. I will now tell you what your future holds. As you consigned me to the darkness, so I consign you, too, to a life spent in the dungeon. Mig looked up. Well, ain't she going upstairs to be a serving maid? No, said Riscuro. Well, ain't I going to be a princess then? No, said Riscuro. But I want to be a princess. No one, said Riscuro, cares what you want. As you know, reader, Megariso has heard this sentence expressed many times in her short life. But now in the dungeon it hit her full force. The rat was right. No one cared what she wanted. No one ever had cared. And perhaps worst of all, no one ever would care. I want, cried Mig. Shh, said the princess. Shut up, said the rat. I want, sobbed Mig. I want. What do you want, Mig? The princess said softly. Huh? Shouted Mig. What do you want, Megariso? The princess shouted. Don't ask her that, said Riscuro. Shut up. But it was too late. The words had already been said. The question at last had been asked. The world stopped spinning, and all of creation held its breath, wanting to hear what it was that Megariso wanted. I want, said Mig. Yes, shouted the Pea. I want my ma, cried Mig into the silent, waiting world. I want my ma. Oh, said the princess, and she held out her hand to Mig. Mig took a hold of it. I want my mother too, said the princess softly, and she squeezed Mig's hand. Stop it, shouted Rescuro. Chain her up, chain her up. Gore, said Meg, I ain't gonna do it. You can't make me do it. I got the knife, don't I? She took the knife and held it up. If you have any sense at all, said Rescuro, and I heartily doubt that you do, you will not use that instrument on me. Without me, you will never find your way out of the dungeon, and you will starve to death here, or worse. Gore, said Meg, then lead us out now, or I will chop you up into little rat bits. No, said Rescuro, the princess shall stay here in the darkness, and you, Meg, will stay with her. But I want to go upstairs, said Meg. I'm afraid that we are stuck here, Meg, shouted the princess, unless the rat has a change of heart and decides to lead us out. There will be no changes of heart, said Rescuro. None. Gore, said Meg, and she lowered the knife. And so the rat and the princess and the servant girl sat together in the dungeon as, outside the castle, the sun had rose, moved through the sky, and sank to the earth again, and night fell. They sat together until the candle had burned out, and another one had to be lit, and they sat together in the dungeon. They sat and sat. And reader, truthfully, they might be sitting there still if a mouse had not arrived. Okay, here is a picture of the Princess P and Meg and Rescuro, and Princess P is asking Meg, what is it you want? What is it you want? And she's trying to hold her hand. Chapter 50, in which the princess says his name. Princess, Despereaux shouted, Princess, I have come to save you. The Princess P heard her name, and she looked up. Despereaux, she whispered, and then she shouted it, Despereaux. Reader, nothing is sweeter in this sad world than the sound of someone you love calling your name. Nothing. And for Despereaux, the sound was worth everything. His lost tail, the trip to the dungeon, and back out of it and back into it again. He ran towards the princess, but Rescuro, baring his teeth, blocked the mouse's way. The princess cried, Oh no, rat, please, don't hurt him. He is my friend. Meg said, Don't worry, princess. I will save the Misi. She took the kitchen knife, and she aimed to cut off the rat's head, but she missed her mark. Whoopsie, said Megariso. Chapter 51. What is that smell? Ow! Screamed Rescuro. He turned to look at where his tail had been. And as he did, Despereaux drew his needle and placed the sharp tip of it right where the rat's heart would be. Don't move, said Despereaux. I will kill you. Ha ha ha, Botticelli laughed from the sidelines. Exactly. He slapped his tail on the floor in approval. Absolutely delightful. A mouse is going to kill a rat. Oh, all of this is much better than I anticipated. I love it when mice come to the dungeon. And here is a picture of Despereaux holding the knife to Rescuro, telling him, I will kill you. Okay. Let me see, said the other rats, pushing and shoving. Stand back, Botticelli told them, still laughing. Let the mouse do his work. Despereaux held the trembling needle against Rescuro's heart. The mouse knew that as a knight, it was his duty to protect the princess, but would killing the rat really make the darkness go away? Despereaux bowed his head ever so slightly, and as he did so, his whiskers brushed against the rat's nose. Rescuro sniffed. What is that smell? He asked. Mousy blood, shouted one rat. Blood and bones, shouted another. You're smelling tears, said Botticelli. Tears and thwarted love. Exactly, said Rescuro, and yet there's something else. He sniffed again, and the smell of soup crashed through his soul like a great wave, bringing with it the memory of light and the chandelier and the music and the laughter and everything. All of the things that were not, would never, could never be available to him as a rat. Soup, moaned Rescuro, and he began to cry. Boo, shouted Botticelli. Hissed the other rats. Kill me, said Rescuro, and he fell down before Despereaux. It will never work. All I wanted was some light, and that is why I brought the princess here. Really, just for some beauty, some light of my own. Please, shouted Botticelli, do kill him. He's a miserable excuse for a rat. No, Despereaux, said the princess, don't kill him. Despereaux lowered his needle. He turned and looked at the pea. Boo, shouted Botticelli again. Kill him, kill him. All this goodness is making me sick. I've lost my appetite. Gore, shouted Meg, waving her knife. I'll kill him. No, wait, said the princess. Riscuro, she said to the rat. What? He said. Tears were falling out of his eyes and creeping down his whiskers and dripping onto the dungeon floor. And then the princess took a deep breath and put a hand on her heart. I think, reader, that she was feeling the same thing that Despereaux had felt when he was faced with his father, begging him for forgiveness. That is, P was aware suddenly of how fragile her heart was, how much darkness was inside of it, fighting always with the light. She did not like the rat. She would never like the rat, but she knew what she must do to save her own heart. And so, here are the words the princess spoke to her enemy. She said, Riscuro, would you like some soup? The rat sniffed. Don't torment me, he said. I promise you, said the princess, that if you lead us out of here, I will get cook to make you some soup, and you can eat it in the banquet hall. Speaking of eating, shouted one of the rats, give us the mousie. Yeah, shouted another, hand over the mousie. Who would want him now? Said Botticelli. The flavor of him will be ruined. All that forgiveness and goodness. Belch. I for one am leaving. Soup in the banquet hall? Riscuro asked the princess. Yes, said the pea. Really? Truly, I promise. Gore, shouted Mig. Soup is illegal. But soup is good, said Despereaux. Yes, said the pea, isn't it? The princess bent down before the mouse. You are my knight, she said to him, with a shining needle, and I am so glad that you found me. Let's go upstairs. Let's eat some soup. And reader, they did. Chapter 52, Happily Ever After. But the question you want answered, I know, is did they live happily ever after? Yes and no. What of Riscuro? Did he live happily ever after? Well, the Princess P gave him free access to the upstairs of the castle, and he was allowed to go back and forth from the darkness of the dungeon to the light of the upstairs. But alas, he never really belonged in either place. The sad fate, I am afraid, of those whose hearts break and then mend in crooked ways. But the rat, in seeking forgiveness, did manage to shed some small light, some happiness into another life. How? Riscuro, reader, told the princess about the prisoner who had once owned a red tablecloth, and the princess saw to it that the prisoner was released, and Riscuro led the man out of the dungeon and to his daughter, Migoriso. Mig, as you might have guessed, did not get to be a princess, but her father, to atone for what he had done, treated her like one for the rest of his days. And what of Despereaux? Did he live happily ever after? Well, he did not marry the princess, if that is what you mean by happily ever after. Even in a world as strange as this one, a mouse and a princess cannot marry. But reader, they can be friends. And they were. Together they had many adventures. Those adventures, however, are another story, and this story, I'm afraid, must now draw to a close. But before you leave, reader, imagine this. Imagine an adoring king and a glowing princess and a serving girl with a crown on her head and a rat with a spoon on his, all gathered around a table in a banquet hall. In the middle of the table, there is a great kettle of soup. And sitting in the place of honor, right next to the princess, is a very small mouse with big ears. And peeking out from behind the dusty velvet curtain, looking in amazement at the scene before them, are 4 other mice. Mon Dieu, look, says Antoinette. He lives, and he seems such the happy mouse. Forgiven, whispers Lester. Cripes, said Furlough, unbelievable. Just so, says the threadmaster, smiling. Just so. And reader, it is just so, isn't it? The end. So there's the Princess P looking at Despereaux sitting on the table. And then right over here, there they are looking out from behind the curtain. All right, so that is the end of the Tale of Despereaux. Such a good book. Okay, so we will decide on our Google Meets tomorrow what our new book will be that will start on Monday, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.